Welcome to the Darkstream, I guess we call it. Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight is going to be one where we engage in something that I am generally loath to do, mostly because I don't have much interest in it. But I think we're going to have to step into a little bit of the internet drama that's going on right now. And what I'm referring to is related to the post that I put up with regards to Nick Fuentes. And the reason that I think that it's important is, number one, Big Bear has alerted us to the fact that what's happening there might be a little bit more problematic than just the usual grifter attempting to grift, which we've seen many times before, and which, however annoying it might be, doesn't really tend to harm anyone except for the people who fall for the grift and, you know, spend their money on it instead of something else that's probably just as bad or worse. You know, we're not in the business of trying to save people from grifters. It's just not a concern. And certainly I've been accused of that. Big Bear's been accused of that. Less and less now as we've delivered on, you know, some of the various things that we promised. And as you know, people see the material results of the stuff that we're doing. And of course, the fact that we're not on YouTube, we're not on CNN, we're not all over the place saying, hey, do this, do this, do that, selling nonsensical stuff. I mean, let's face it, I'm really well suited to, you know, play the game that Dan Bilzerian is playing with his, you know, Sigma Studio. I'll teach you how to be a Sigma. I mean, the Sigma grind set, whatever. I mean, it's from my perspective, it's just so absurd, you know. It's like, I'll teach you how to be Italian. It's like, look, either you're Italian or you're not, you know. You can learn to fake it a little bit. I'm sure, you know, you can talk like this and you can wave your hands around. But you're never going to fool a real Italian, you know. So anyhow, what Owen was talking about is the fact that Fuentes is not backed by the usual suspects, which is to say, you know, he's pretty clearly not backed by the Mercers. You know, he's actually called them out. He was talking about how the Mercers were behind something or other. I think the Mercers were behind Tucker Carlson's independent setup, which is not a surprise. Apparently they put 13 million into that, which Tucker should be very careful about, because they put 6 million into Milo's project, and then when they felt that he had gone a bit too far out of their control, they promptly converted it to a loan and forced him to repay everything that they had supposedly invested in him. Now that's not an investment, obviously, but and also obviously Milo didn't have the best contract lawyers looking over that one. But I mean, there's a lot of shady stuff related to that. I mean, it honestly felt that some of it was specifically designed to keep Castalia from publishing his book, which we've been told 5 times that by his agent that we were going to publish. And so, with Nick Fuentes, in the reasonably early days of UATV, a lot of people were telling me, "Oh, you need to get Nick on UATV. Oh, he's great. He's the voice of the new generation," which, to be honest, always makes me very suspicious. When I think of the voice of a generation, to me, that is a self-identified thing, usually done by a pernicious and very, very small group of people. And when I say very small, I mean like 20. The Beats appointing themselves the voice of the 60s. Well, no, Allen Ginsberg was not the voice of the 60s. Not even close. As awful as the 60s were, as reprehensible as the boomers are, I wouldn't put that one at their door. Your average boomer who romanticizes the 60s would not list Allen Ginsberg or Howell in his top 50 elements of that particular decade. So, and in like manner, supposedly the voice of her generation was, who is that fat, unattractive Girls? She wrote the television show Girls. She's fat, unattractive, and she apparently molested her little sister. I've forgotten her name, thankfully. But you know what I'm talking about. Like the big clip from that show was always, "I think I might be the voice of my generation." It's like, no, you're definitely not. You may be many things, but that is not one of them. And so hearing that, Lena Dunham, that's right. Jeez. I mean, I don't even know what generation she is. I don't know if she's Gen X, or I think she's probably a millennial. But man, she's not representative of either in any way, shape, or form. Anyhow, so a lot of people had said, "Oh, you need to," when I say a lot, I mean like 10 or 12 people said, "Oh, you need to check this guy out. You need to check this guy out." And I did. I watched like parts of 2 or 3 videos. I was impressed with the professional stage studio setup that he had. It's, even back then, it was way better than mine is now. And I didn't really think anything of that at the time. You spend a bit of money on lighting and whatnot, and you can make something look pretty good. The content was not of any real interest to me. He didn't say anything that I regarded as new, creative, original. But, he did seem to be unafraid to speak his mind. And, that was something that was, at least in theory, compatible with what we were doing and what we are doing at Unauthorized. But the interesting thing was when I gave him a call and we had a conversation, he absolutely could not have been less interested in joining Unauthorized. All of the sort of things that people who join Unauthorized are concerned about, algorithmic suppression on YouTube, demonetization, outright banning, etc., etc. None of that was of any concern to him at the time. And I didn't think anything of it. Maybe he's just young and stupid. Maybe he's just not really prone to being forward thinking. There's plenty of possibilities. It really wasn't something that I thought much about at the time. In retrospect, I do think that that was my first real clue. And I mention this only because it's one that I did not recognize at the time. But that was my first real clue that he might be a new form of gatekeeper, a new form of controlled opposition. I mean, why would you be totally unconcerned about that? And then the next thing that made me wonder about him, keeping in mind that this is not somebody that I gave any thought to whatsoever, and you can search my blog for the number of references to him, and you'll see that my level of interest has been nil, especially if you consider the fact that this is while Big Bear has been going back and forth with him, and I even had my own very brief encounter with him. So the second thing that I noticed was he comes up with this cozy TV thing, right? Now, Nick is not a technical guy. I'm a former software designer. I'm a former game designer. When I developed software, I'm not a programmer, but I am a designer of systems and software. And, some of the games that I designed at the time were groundbreaking in a number of ways, like completely ahead of the curve. And so I'm comfortable doing something like creating our own streaming system, right? Now, obviously, we've had ups and downs. Last year and a half, more downs than ups. But, throughout all of this, we've just kept doing what we're doing, created our own stuff, kept the lights on, right? Well, Fuentes comes up and has this like whole system just as if by magic. Now, I'm sure that if I actually looked into it, it'd be relatively easy to figure out how the pieces were put together, how it came together, etc., etc. But it was just a little bit too slick and superficial to justify what he was doing with it. We went and got good quality people. Now, granted, we don't have as many, I don't know what was up with Wrangler Star, et cetera, et cetera. But, we have quality content. We've got Chuck Dixon, we've got Owen, we've got Razor, we've got Stefan, the people that joined Cozy were, for the most part, complete non-entities and irrelevant. So it was a little strange. The combination of those things was just a little strange. Proves nothing. It's just something that you note in passing, right? And then, he picked a bit of a quarrel with Ben Shapiro, and he challenged Ben to a debate. And this was back in, let's see here. This was back in November 8th, 2019. I looked this up because I knew I had it around here somewhere. And anyhow, Nick challenged him to a debate, and Benny ran away. Now, I'm not quite sure, I don't recall, maybe some of you guys might recall, but somehow in between November 8th and November 23rd, I somehow ended up getting involved in this, and I'm not sure how. Somebody somehow issued a invitation to a debate. For some reason I can't seem to get to that other page there. But it was kind of strange, you know. The whole let me see if I can turn it off and turn it back on, see what happens. You know, so I think that he was interested in this debate with Ben Shapiro. And he'd been saying some things that I didn't think were correct. If I recall correctly, it was something, he was saying something about how multinational society, Americans had to get used to multiracial societies or something. Manuel says, I remember a lot of groypers were on the Darkstream chat on YouTube. Yeah, I mean, I don't recall if they were, you know, again, I don't pay too much attention to this stuff. I don't remember them, you know, getting out of hand like Ethan and the Comicsgate guys did when I was on YouTube. But I do remember that there were a number of Nick Fuentes people that popped in. And so I issued an invitation to a debate with him. And we can't get in there this way, so I'm just going to have to read it to you. I'll find it elsewhere. I'll put it up where you can't see it, but you can go to the blog and see it. Just do a search for Nick Fuentes debate, and it'll come up, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. So let's see what we had here. Okay. So there was something around, okay. It says Thomas Howard, whoever that is, leaped to a completely erroneous conclusion subsequent to my invitation to Mr. Fuentes. Oh, I see. This is what it was. To debate a specific historical event of particular interest to him. And so what happened was he had issued a debate challenge to Ben Shapiro concerning the Holocaust. And Shapiro, of course, ran away, like he always does. You know, Shapiro's run away from me, he's run away from Michelle Malkin, he's run away from Milo, he's run away from Nick Fuentes. He would run away from Owen if the subject had ever come up, of course. But I just thought, look, I had an interesting debate on the Holocaust and its significance to today with Louise Mensch, and you know, the former UK politician, member of Parliament. And so I thought, okay, you know, this could be interesting. And so Fuentes didn't, I don't think he even responded. He didn't respond directly to me anyhow. And so so this letter pops up, or this guy writes, "This must mean Nick the Knife has finally and definitively turned down the come join us at unauthorized TV overtures. Considering his live viewership, nightly super chat support, and the fact that he is taken as a serious threat by Conservative Inc., this must be quite a blow to the ego. To the gamma, the sting of rejection is like the slow knife, the one that takes its time, which slips quietly between the bone. That's the knife that cuts the deepest." So obviously we've got somebody who is not only familiar with me, not only familiar with unauthorized, but he's also familiar with what was Alpha Game at the time. Sigma Game didn't exist. And so, you know, it's interesting. To me, that was interesting because this did not just seem, this didn't strike me as being very organic. Skydog says, "I found it telling that the groypers on the Darkstream went crazy at the flip of a switch." Yeah, there's always been something inorganic about the groypers, in my opinion. They remind me a lot of the, Manuel says, "Oh, and you challenged Nick to a written debate on the Holocaust." So, yeah, that's exactly what I did. So I said, let me be perfectly clear about the relevant facts. Nick Fuentes was never invited to join unauthorized TV. Never. Out of about 85 established creators who have expressed varying degrees of interest in joining us at one time or another, precisely 3 have been invited to join UATV. Dr. Fulton Brown, Zammy the Giant Sheepadoodle, remember when we had Zammy videos on there, and Wrangler Star. All 3 accepted the invitation without hesitation. I've spoken once to Mr. Fuentes on May 8th, 2019 for about 2019. May 8th, 2019 for about 20 minutes. We had a good and mutually respectful discussion in which it soon became apparent to both of us that it did not make any sense for him to join unauthorized, which is why he never asked to join it and I never invited him to do so. I further note that America First with Nicholas J. Fuentes has 68.9 thousand YouTube subscribers, which is excellent considering that he had around 30,000 back in May when we spoke. So keep in mind, in May of 2019, he had fewer YouTube subscribers than I did. I think I had 34,000 or so when I got kicked off, maybe 36. That being said, by way of comparison, UATV's newest contributor, Wrangler Star, has 1.33 million subscribers. In summary, no one at Unauthorized cares even a fraction of an iota whether Mr. Fuentes wants to be on Unauthorized or not. We certainly wish Mr. Fuentes great success in his campaign against Conservative Incorporated, but we neither need nor want him on our channel. Our egos, such as they are, remained intact and unaffected. You know, I was being respectful and polite to Nick. I was putting in context the facts about his relative position to us. You know, Nick would, you know, just like Ben Shapiro. I was there when Ben Shapiro was the number 14 guy on WorldNet Daily. I saw what his numbers were. They were trivial. People did not really read him. People did not really care about him. You know, the fact that he has a big audience now doesn't change the fact that head-to-head in an equal playing field, in a level playing field, he's inferior. You know, yeah, if you drop somebody, you know, if you basically, like Creators Syndicate did, if you say you have to take his column and run it, if you're going to want to run one of our popular ones, yeah, you're going to get picked up by papers all over the place. You know, if you're going to be parachuted into Michael Savage's radio spot, you're going to have a big audience. You know, but Howard Stern's about to retire. Let's say that the Howard Stern people at Sirius or whatever decide, you know what, we need a replacement for Howard because Howard's going away. Let's give it to Vox. I think Vox Day would be a good substitute for Howard Stern. Obviously that would be wrong. Howard Stern is much better on the radio than I am. But the point is that if you handed me his audience, if you handed me Joe Rogan's Spotify audience, that would not make me successful. It would give me the trappings of success, but it wouldn't mean that I earned it in any way, shape, or form. Would it? You know, of course not. And so that's why it's so strange. For some reason, I'm having trouble getting back onto voxday.net. Anyhow, the point is, you know, the fact that these guys get bigger doesn't mean that anything about their success or their talents or anything else. It means that they got handed something by somebody. Not all success is that way, but a surprising amount of it is, especially in the public arena. you know. CCP says he's ready to sign up for Sirius. I appreciate that, CCP. It's nice to see that kind of loyalty. Okay, this is a bit odd. I wonder if we're having trouble here. There we go. Okay, I guess we're doing fine. I have no idea what that's all about. I have to look this up again now. Okay, so that was what happened. That was the first thing. I put everything in perspective, got the facts straight, etc., etc. Well, of course, the way it always seems to do with these gamma heavy groups is it ends up turning into a bit of a thing. And so I posted that that note, and then what was it, about 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I ended up sending Nick Fuentes an email because I was informed that he was willing to debate me, but not about the Holocaust. So I said, "Dear Nick, I've been informed that you are willing to debate me, so long as the subject is not related to the Holocaust." That was an interesting decision, but okay. "Very well. I propose a written debate concerning your following assertion. Americans have to live with multiracialism. I suggest we limit our entries to 2,500 words each, with no more than 3 entries apiece. As you will be arguing in the affirmative, I'm willing to let you have the first word. I also suggest that we agree either party is permitted to publish the entire debate verbatim. Please email me your first entry at your earliest convenience. I will post it at my blog without modification or comment. Regards, Vox." Then there's an update. "There are indications that Nick has already run away a second time, despite his professed willingness to debate. Since I cannot attest to the veracity of the report from one of the comments here, we will wait and see." Because, of course, I'm not watching his show. I'm not paying attention to his Twitter. I'm just waiting for him to shoot me an email or send me the debate. "A few super chatters asked Nick about your new debate request last night. He responded that your audience is too small to be worth debating." Oh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, this is just a report from somebody saying that they watched his show. If he actually said that, and we don't know that he did, it doesn't speak well for his time preferences or his ability to think strategically. And then update. "It's confirmed. Little Nicky runned away again. Save Western Civilization Now says Vox Day wants to challenge you to a written debate on whether a multiracial society is inevitable. Do you think you're going to accept a written debate with Vox Day?" "No, I don't think I'm interested in that. I only debate people that are relevant." Now, this is what's funny, because this is back in 2019, and he's claiming that I'm not relevant. Okay. It's estimated that there are over 50 billion references to the term Sigma male alone. If you go on Reddit, if you go on 4chan, poll, whatever, you will see constant use of the term midwit. Now, I personally may not be that relevant because my audience is reasonably small, if loyal, thank you. But to argue that a public intellectual with that level of influence over the language itself is irrelevant by somebody who had about the same number of YouTube subscribers that I did before I was kicked off, Pillow Vendor points out that magic dirt is widely used now as well. Yeah. Not only this, but this is not that long after I was the best-selling political philosopher on Amazon for 18 straight months. You know, if you were on political philosophy, and this is not one of those categories where there's nobodies. When you were on, you know, Amazon and you checked out that category, it was basically Vox Day, Niccolo Machiavelli, Karl Marx. So the claim of irrelevance, to which I don't take any offense, but it was just a strange way to justify running away, you know. And then it got a little bit more. He also made some other comments that I posted there. I don't want to debate him, meaning me, because it's too boring, dude. It's too boring. Everybody would think that it would be exciting, but I can tell you for a fact that there would be no entertainment value in debating someone as boring and as slow as Vox Day. So the guy's boring and he's irrelevant, you know. Who's watching the Darkstream? If he can pull more than 2,000 viewers concurrent watching the Darkstream, maybe I'd consider him worth my time. But, I mean, the guy's a has-been. You could say he never was. You know, this is somebody who's been floating around the scene like writing books. And what does he have to show for it? Infogalactic? A gay comic book? You know, all these like just stupid projects that just don't go anywhere. Interesting. I find, I added, I find it tremendously informative to observe that this little moron actually considers Amazon bestsellers and multi-platinum selling games, not to mention multi-platinum selling records, to be less relevant than 2,000 concurrent YouTube viewers. He's never paid a bill in his life. To say that he's not ready for prime time is a gargantuan underachievement or understatement. So that's my direct history with Nick Fuentes. And that's why I pay him no attention whatsoever. I don't take him seriously. He's a liar. He's a coward. And he's not intellectually serious. You know, there's no way that he is can be considered intellectually serious. And what's more is that his sudden turnaround, his sudden unwillingness to debate me, because remember, he said that he was. He absolutely said that he was. He just didn't want to debate about the Holocaust, right? And that told me that he was and is controlled opposition. Because one thing that's very clear is that the controlled opposition is only allowed to platform each other. So this is why you don't see, you know, you'd never see Razor Fist being invited to go on his show. Because even though Razor Fist meets all those qualifications easily, but Razor Fist owns himself. You know, Razor Fist owns his own soul. I own my own soul. Owen owns his own soul. Chuck Dixon owns his own soul. John Della Rose owns his own soul. And so what you're seeing with now, with the Tucker Carlson versus Nick Fuentes thing, the Charlie Kirk versus Nick Fuentes thing, it's basically red team versus blue team all over again. And that's why the reason that the reason that Tucker Carlson is going on and on about, you know, about Nick being dangerous and making a big deal out of things, it's actually meant to pump Nick up as the bad guy for the Philo-Semite faction of the media right wing. What they're trying to do is they're trying to do what they always do, which is create this small window and claim that that is the entire range of discussion, debate, and so forth. They're having to do that now because the left is dead. The left is bankrupt. Nobody cares at all what anybody on the left says. Everything that they've done, remember how enthusiastic people were during the Obama years, which weren't that long ago. They were all, energized and post-racial this and equality that. Well, it all went to hell, unsurprisingly. And so what they have to do, so what they had then was you had the left on the one side, and then you had the conservative Inc. group that was on the right. William F. Buckley defined the acceptable far edge of the right. That's why they pushed out Joe Sobran. They pushed out the John Birch Society. All those things got pushed out, disappeared, vanished. It was a lot easier to do in the pre-internet era. Pillow Vendor says, and then the noticing happened. Yeah, and then the noticing happened. And then the left failed. So all the dreams of the left, which, were the globalism, free trade, the area that the Bush-Clinton group represented, that sort of left Republican, right Democrat thing, all those dreams crashed and burned. The European Union failed. Immigration turned into crime. And so now nobody believes any of the promises of the left. So what they had to do is they had to shift the whole thing right. The Overton window moved, so they needed to respond to that. Yeah, equality became trans. The clown show became too overtly clownish for the average person. And so what they needed to do is they needed to make sure that they established a new wall on the right to prevent the real Christian nationalists from coming to the fore. So what Nick Fuentes is a fake Christian nationalist. He's not a nationalist, and he's probably not a Christian. I won't say that he isn't because it's not for me to judge, but I am always very, very, very suspicious of people who are very free with talking about Christ and very reluctant to talk about Jesus Christ. Now, granted, anyone can just go ahead and say Jesus Christ is Lord. But for whatever reason, it's much, much more difficult for the fraudulent to say Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior than it is for them to say Christ is King. Because remember, even the demons admit that Christ is King. And so I don't know if there's some spiritual law in place, but there's definitely something to what Brian Niemeyer coined as the witch test, and and fake versions of Christianity have been around, for centuries. Certainly, I can recall various flavors and forms of it even before the modern churchian movement became so dominant across Protestant America. But the point of what Fuentes was created to be was to make sure that Christian nationalism got watered down. To be honest, Andrew Torba's been great, but I think that he is a genuine Christian nationalist. I don't think the guy that he wrote his book with is. because anytime you see nationalism turned into civic nationalism, it's not real. Just as anytime you see Christianity turned into anything beyond the need for man's salvation, and Jesus Christ being the only way to the Father, you know that there's some level of fraud. And so when you look at what they're trying to do, is basically they're trying to prevent the return of Christendom. And they're going to fail. We know they're going to fail. I mean, to a certain extent, the mere fact that they're at that point now means that they've already failed. They wanted to take it, they wanted to turn the USA into the new Carthage. They didn't want to have to commit their child sacrifices hidden away in little abortion centers, where they had to, they wanted to engage in their big satanic rituals with their ziggurats and pyramids right out in front of everybody under the sun. That's what their goal was. And they already know that they're not going to achieve that. And it was really interesting. I saw a comment on by a Chinese guy. It was like a Chinese tweet of some sort. And he said that people don't realize that beginning with the 2010s, China essentially waged a major intellectual and to a certain extent spiritual battle against what they called the degenerate values of the West. And this was directly connected to the erection of the Great Firewall of China, the refusal to allow all the American social media companies in. And the one thing that he pointed out was that it was, he said it was probably the biggest anti-Semitic campaign ever. And so what that strongly suggests is that both China and Russia actually know what it is they're up against. They know. That's, you hear Putin talk about the vampire's ball and the empire of lies and all that sort of thing. You see the way that the Russian soldiers have embraced Orthodox Christianity. I mean, it is absolutely stunning when you're a Gen Xer who was raised on tales of the danger of people smuggling Bibles into the East Bloc and into the Soviet Union, to see that the Soviet Union has experienced genuine revival. And it gives us hope. The USA is still, despite all of its problems, travails, foreign occupation, etc., the US is still a fundamentally, or I should say America is still a fundamentally Christian nation. More so than Europe, more so than China. Only Russia now, and to a lesser extent, I think, is it Ecuador? Are more overtly and militantly Christian. And the main problem that Americans face is that they just don't recognize the reality yet. That's why it's so important for them to create these structures, these fake structures with, Fuentes, being the voice of Christian nationalism and saying amazingly, utterly stupid things like your body, our choice. Okay. What does a little, very possibly gay guy like Nick Fuentes care about women's bodies? He's aggressively anti-marriage. He's anti-children. This is not a man whose objectives and values are in line with those of traditional Christendom or with Christianity as we know it in the Bible. Yes, I'm very well aware of Paul's admonition that it is preferable to be as he is and devote your life to preaching the gospel all around the world. But that's not what Nick is doing. Have we seen a Christian revival among the Groypers? Are they known for their, public works, for the strength of their faith, for their missionary zeal? Now, I'm not saying that our community is either. I don't think that we've necessarily been as strong as we could be in that regard. I probably haven't been. The Gray Man says St. Augustine's On the Good of Marriage answered the stay single retards 1500 years ago. And this doesn't even get into the really questionable stuff that Owen's talking about. The way that Nick has surrounded himself with people who are known degenerates, known criminal degenerates, and has not done anything but defend them in their degeneracy. So I think that this pretty strongly confirms what we already knew back in 2019. He's fake. He's a form of controlled opposition. He's a new form of controlled opposition. I understand why people who saw through Ben Shapiro and saw through the likes of Michelle Malkin and Jonah Goldberg, I can understand why people who saw through that sort of gatekeeper didn't see through Nick Fuentes. But keep in mind, a lot of you didn't see through Jordan Peterson initially either, right? So it happens. And that's one of the valuable things that Owen Benjamin does, is that he's very good at seeing through those things. Milo's book on Nick Fuentes. Milo's a book on Nick Fuentes. That's crazy. The Complete Wit and Wisdom of Nicholas J. Fuentes. Hardcover. Is it blank? it strikes. 500 blank pages. Yeah, that makes sense. I assumed it had to be some kind of joke like that. I still feel like I need to write that book. 101 Great Democrat Jokes. And every single one of them is, that Republican? He sure is stupid, isn't he? Jeez. It's amazing. It's amazing you get to my age and you realize that the humor of the left hasn't changed one little bit. I think it'd be funny, if George Carlin was still alive, it would be funny to see him do a bit on the 7 words you can't say on television now. Because apparently you can say all the words that you couldn't say back then, but there are some words you can't say on television now. And I do think it's interesting that, you know, well, you know, all I can say is if George Carlin was alive, certainly he would do that, wouldn't he? I mean, he's a fearless comic, right? I mean, the only reason I can imagine that he hasn't done it yet is because he died, you know, in 1994. But, you know, c'est la vie. Anyhow, that's really all I've got to say about Mr. Fuentes. You know, I don't think that he matters that much, other than, as Hawk pointed out, the fact that he was at the Capitol on July 6th, urging people to go in, and then ran away and never got arrested, despite the fact that a lot of other people were hunted down and you know, unjustly jailed and had the book thrown at them for far less than Nick Fuentes is on video doing. You know, I think that, I mean, I don't have an opinion on whether he's a, you know, some sort of Fed or not, but it wouldn't be surprising. I mean, it would certainly explain where the money comes from. So, anyhow, as always, don't fall for this nonsense. You know, one thing I noticed that separates Owen and me from a lot of other people. Yes, Pillow said, didn't he also claim his bank accounts were frozen? He did, and I believe they were briefly frozen, but somebody posted the letter from the bank informing him that the accounts weren't frozen anymore. So, you know, apparently they got the call from his employers. No, it's okay. You can unfreeze them. Anyhow, but, you know, don't take people seriously because they say something that you agree with. That's not what you need to pay attention to. The fact that they say something that you agree with is nice, but it's insignificant. It proves nothing. Anyone can say anything. And you always need to keep in mind that there is this machine in place attempting to limit the extent of the public discourse. It's been around, I mean, it's called the media. This is not news. Grayman says, Fuentes clearly stagnated by 2020. He's the same now as 2018, no growth. Well, yeah, I mean, that's obviously, I mean, first of all, he's never been a public intellectual. Jacob Kalsi, the great Finnish science fiction writer, his cousin, I believe, says, does not falling include not my style, or is it exclusively that person is a problem? I'm saying that don't get excited about somebody because they happen to say 1 or 2 or 10 things that you agree with. See what they are. Who are they as a person? Who are they as a, you know, what is their intellectual framework? Because if the framework is not genuine, if the persona is a fabrication, there's always going to be anomalies that maybe they're very small, but they're meaningful. You know. Now, obviously, there can be, let's see. Chris Hawk says, maybe worth mentioning your Telegram channel exploded the minute that you posted on Fuentes. Are you talking about today? Or are you talking about, like, you must be talking about today, not back then. To call it normally sleepy would be like calling Mr. Rogers a coke fiend. Yeah, I mean, obviously the gay bat signal went out, and now we're going to see some kind of nonsense, which is going to be interesting to see how they try to do it, because normally what they would do is they would all show up where the discussion is happening, but the discussion is not happening anywhere that they can participate. You know, I'm sure they've got their little spies and stuff in Social Galactic, but they can't join Social Galactic en masse, and so they can't take part in the discourse. That's one reason why we left these things closed in the first place, because you know it's very clear that I am not welcome to participate in the mainstream public discourse. Fine. I have no need to. I don't particularly want to. You know, I'm not an ambitious 25-year-old wannabe nationally syndicated columnist anymore. That day is done. But the fact that Skyduck says neither Vox nor Owen told me to storm the Capitol. Just saying. Well, yeah, exactly. But anyhow, to get back to the point, is there's always going to be little things, little anomalies that could indicate a problem. You could look at me and say, well, you know, he was on Wax Tracks. He's got a connection to Heidi Fleiss. You know, there's a couple little things here and there. He's got a connection to Enron, of all things. But those are just happenstance. Those are things from back in the day. There's no connection between those sorts of things and what I do now, who I am now, etc., etc. It's no more relevant than the particular soccer club I happen to play for in between 11th and 12th grade. You know, but there are things that do make a difference. There are things that happen to give you indicators that something else is going on. Like, for example, going back all the way to May 2019. Why was he so unconcerned about the possibility that his YouTube channel would be banned? You know, at that time, the whole reason we formed Unauthorized is because everybody was deeply concerned about that. Even the people who hadn't been banned yet and weren't planning to leave were very interested in being on Unauthorized, so they would have a place to go if the banning wave continued. And yet, this guy who was supposedly far out there, really contrarian. Now, here's the funny thing, and here's the total proof that all of this stuff is fake. And all of this stuff is nonsense. Dan says, I'm seeing a lot of suspicious new users on SG lately. Well, you know, we'll see, but if they act up, you know, we've got excellent moderators who will not hesitate to keep them under control. You know, and that's what the mutant block is for. Anyhow, he's far too dynamic, provocative, and funny to be scripted or controlled. Yeah, sure. And then what's interesting to me is how many of you can remember John Zerka? Can any one of you remember John Zerka? Zerka was supposed to be elevated with Fuentes. He was a huge fan of Fuentes. And they actually tried to push him as alpha male John Zerka. And they called him the most controversial man on social media. Nobody even knows who he is. Nobody has any idea. Because it didn't work. It didn't catch on. But that was, you know, John Zerka was an abortive attempt to do what they did with Nick. You know, it's a standard routine. Paul made me do it. Says yes, he had like 6 months of clout. You know, most controversial man on social media is somebody that none of us have ever heard of or paid attention to. Think about that. And think about that the next time that somebody sends you some, oh, this guy's great, you got to pay attention to him. He's not necessarily fake. You know, he's not necessarily fake. You know, Razor Fist has turned out to be far more genuine and far more substantive than I'd ever imagined. You know, I was genuinely taken aback when I read the, you know, when I read his comic. And, but you know, people who are real have substance. People who are real have an intellectual framework that is consistent. It may be a little bit incoherent, you know. Big Bear certainly is dynamic in the extreme, shall we say. But anyhow, that's all I've got. So have a good evening. We're at 10% on unauthorized right now. We're at 10% of where we want to be. So, you know, encourage your fellows to you know, get on the new payment system. It's more important than ever because I don't know if you heard yet, but Gab AI just got kicked off their payment processor. I do think that eventually there's a chance that the Trump administration will extend their debanking order to include payment processors, which would be great, but we can't count on that. And so, you know, just encourage everybody to come back on, get on with the new system, and we'll, you know, we're building it up again for the 4th time now. And, you know, that's what we do. You know, we know the victory is ours in the end, and that's what gives us the stamina to be persistent. Tomorrow night is Archaven Nights. I'll be on with John, and we will be doing, same as we always do, first hour double streaming on YouTube and unauthorized, and then the second hour just on unauthorized. And I'll give you, oh, and I want to show you one more thing before I go. Here is the set. You'll notice Volume 1 and Volume 2. So this is the brand new, newly bound Cambridge History of the Byzantine Empire, Volume 2. We've got 600 of them that will be traveling to the States soon. They are exceptionally pretty and very unique. And so all the history subscribers are going to be very happy to have these two on their shelves soon. Couple things we learned in the process. Number one, there's no point in doing blind stampings. You just can't even see them. So it's there, but you know, you have to, it's like basically there for the benefit of people who usually use Braille. Also, this particular leather did not let us do hubs, so it's very nice. It's like the most genuine leather you've ever experienced, but it's probably not ideal for books. So even though that's what it's designed for, so it's also like 4 times more expensive. So it was a bit of an experiment. Glad we did it. Glad we have these books because you know the Cambridge histories are very special, but we probably won't be using that leather again. So yes, payments from outside the US are now viable, and so also I should mention that the payment wall on unauthorized is going to be going up soon, probably next week. So on that note, I wish you all a good evening. I'm Vox Day, And this is the Darkstream.